Hey friends. So I'm in my resort here in Park City, Utah. I call it a resort because I didn't realize I was going to a resort. I thought I was going to a motel. But it turns out I have a room with a fireplace and some gorgeous furniture, nice big bed. It's not bad. And I'm here for a leadership conference for foundation work, working with organizations to give away money. And I met with a colleague today, and we sort of we're going through this week, this 3-day experience together, and somebody that I knew I resonated with, and somebody that I knew I shared a lot of creative background with, or not so much background, but just a shared love of certain arts, especially theater. I knew we shared theater as both a passion and a practice. And what I did not expect and what I did not know is just the level of synchronicity that was gonna emerge from this meeting in person and being kind of diving into this process together. And the process hadn't even started. That's the funny thing. The conference doesn't start till tomorrow. This is like the warm-up. And it blew my mind, because what showed up for me, what I was reminded of, because it's not something that I didn't know, but I was reminded that everything's connected, and life is always extending the next step, the next little bit of road, the next flagstone that our foot needs to step onto. Oh my gosh. It can be challenging when we're not totally clear on what's coming next. And I had this moment today. We were talking about the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and Billy, my friend, was saying something about how the translator who did the first English translation said that he did this translation specifically for Westerners, and especially, pardon me, it's been a long time since I did a handheld one of these video posts in my bed. Normally I'm sitting up and a little more alert, but this was a long day. But this guy said that he did the translation with Westerners in mind, and particularly Americans, because Americans are people who have a tendency to dive into a spiritual practice, dive into a spiritual path, and be really enthusiastic about it, and be really clear that this is their path. And then when things get hard, we think we might be on the wrong path, and we jump ship to another path. And that's something that, in some ways, when I look at my own spiritual evolution, my own life evolution, I can't help but diagnose a little of that. I can't help but acknowledge a little of that and see some of that input, and I've often, as a result of and this is not something I'm observing for the first time, but when I've observed that in the past, I've gathered in an appreciation for people who really are steeped in one tradition and who come from one tradition and who have a clear lineage, and they're like, well, this is my lineage, this is just my practice, and because the tradition, the path and the tradition end up being the kind of like the bumpers in the lane, the bumpers that keep us in the lane, that keep us moving down the road. And as someone who, I've done like lots and lots of video posts on what I call creative spirituality, which is basically my perception that the creative process can be approached like a spiritual path, and it will render the same revelations that a spiritual path does. It will reveal the same truths about the universe. We can discover them. They will be expressed through us spontaneously if we are seriously devoted to a creative practice. And I totally believe that to be true. And in many ways, that's my path. That is my path. That's the path I've always been on. That's how I practice. It's the thing that I know. It's the thing that I never seem to depart from. It's the path I never leave behind, or the tradition that I never leave behind and try and find something else. But it doesn't have some of the restrictions of a tradition that might feel restrictive sometimes, but that also constitute stability and provide integrity if we will simply surrender to them. They create a kind of solidity in our practice, and an acknowledgement of the legacy that we carry. All spiritual practice, just like a musical practice, just like any other creative practice, there's a legacy there. We've learned, whether or not we've had great teachers in our life, and I have had a number of truly spectacular teachers. Incredibly, incredibly inspiring people I've had in my life. Whether or not we've had that, we are standing at the leading edge of all of the progress that has been made in our discipline up to now. We may not be presented with all of it at one time. If you think about how many musicians right now in the world are making music, and what are all the different kind of leading light musicians in the world right now thinking about? What are they doing? Where are their musical explorations taking them? Well, I can't possibly speak to all that. That's a world's worth of genius. But that is actually the context in which we live, and we have access to as much of that as we want. And so you know, I take that, I attempt to take that in the same spirit as I would take the tradition of a very kind of clearly defined path. You know, one of the beautiful things about a tradition is that it acknowledges that. It acknowledges the history. It acknowledges the history of how we got to where we are now. That's an amazing thing. That's a wonderful, wonderful, amazing thing. To be able to appreciate not just our own revelations and the benefits and the wisdom and the insights that we get from a certain practice, but to be able to appreciate where those came from, how they evolved, the rationale behind certain practices, and the in many cases incredibly elegant structure of an unfolding, you know, an understanding of how revelation unfolds. It's a remarkable thing that a lot of wisdom traditions have managed to do, to kind of codify and thereby make accessible to a great many people the nature of unfolding spiritual wisdom. That's incredible. You know, we tend to get pretty down on the hardcore fundamentalists in the world, religious fundamentalists of any kind, really, because it seems like religion and traditional spiritual paths are so restrictive. They don't allow, they're so dogmatic. But that's not what the paths are. That's just how certain people hold that information. And usually it's not even very much of the information. It's usually like one little scrap of the information that somebody turned into a golden calf. Really, the tradition is a codification of human evolution that often took hundreds or thousands of years to accrue and be able to be written down in one place, to be coalesced into what can be called a spiritual tradition. That's a remarkable feat of human technology, to be able to bring bring practices and principles and insights together into something coherent that basically creates a map for anybody to follow who wants to do it, who wants to get to that destination. So I'm giving you just a tiny little taste of where my conversation today took me, but you can probably tell it was pretty inspiring. It was pretty remarkable where we got, and the fact that it just happened. It just was as naturally emerging revelation tells me I'm on the right track. Tells me I didn't fly to Park City and get stuck in this resort for nothing. I'm here for a reason. And that feels good. So that's where I am today. Much love. I appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon.